The sun over the New Mexico territory in that year of 1870 was not a friend. It was a hammer, beating the dust of the high desert into a fine, choking powder that got in a man's teeth and stayed there. It was a Tuesday, a cattle trade day, and the air at Jedediah Corbett's ranch was thick with the smell of scorched earth, branding smoke, and the sour sweat of nervous longhorns. Corbett's ranch was not a home. It was a fortress of brutality, dug into the edge of a town that had more saloon doors than church doors. It was a place men came to do hard business and left from quick, before the trouble that always simmered there boiled over. In the middle of this heat and noise, a young woman named Alina moved like a shadow. She was hauling buckets of water from the well to the holding pens. Her bare feet cracked and gray with the alkali dust. The wood handle of the bucket was slick in her grip, but her hands were too callous to feel it. She kept her eyes down, always down, on the ground, on her own feet, on the sloshing water. To look up was to invite notice. To invite notice was to invite pain. A man named Brant was the overseer, a thick-necked man with a sun-scorched face and eyes that saw everything as his to break. He walked the yard with a short, leather-wrapped stick in his hand, tapping it against his thigh. He did not need to use it often. The threat was enough. Alina kept her pace steady, not too fast, which looked like fear, not too slow, which looked like defiance, just the steady, invisible rhythm of work. She had been held in bondage since she was a girl, passed from one hard man to another after her mother. An indentured woman from back east had died and left her with no name, no papers, and no one to claim her but the men who saw profit in a strong back. The law did not see her. She was just there, property, like a mule or a broken-down wagon. She passed a group of new arrivals, cowboys shouting and spitting tobacco juice as they separated the steers. She did not look at them, but she felt their eyes slide over her. A low whistle, a quiet, ugly word. She tensed, her shoulders drawing up, but she did not break her stride. She just kept walking, kept fetching the water, trying to be nothing more than a post in the ground. Into this yard rode Eli Morgan. Eli was not a clean man. He was rugged, built of the same hard materials as the land he rode. His hat was stained with sweat and alkali, his duster coated in the dust of a long drive. He had brought 200 head of prime steer for Corbett, and he was tired down to the bone. He rode with a slump in his shoulders that was not just from the trail, but from things he had done, and things he had failed to do. His past was a heavy pack, and he carried it with him everywhere. He swung down from his horse, his joints cracking in the dry heat. Corbett came out of the ranch house, a big man with a gray beard and a pistol belted high on his waist. "Morgan," Corbett grunted, not offering a hand. "Corbett," Eli said, his voice a low rasp. He nodded toward the herd. "Count 'em. They're trail thin, but the stock is good." "They'd better be." Corbett squinted at the cattle, then yelled for Brant. "Brant, get these penned. We'll count 'em through the chute." As the men started shouting and pushing the cattle, Eli leaned against a fence post, pulling the makings for a cigarette from his vest. He was waiting for his money, and he did not like waiting on Corbett's land. The place felt wrong. It felt like a trap. And that is when he saw her. She was walking back from the well, the empty buckets swinging at her sides. She wore a dress that was little more than stitched-together flour sacks, gray with grime. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe knot, but strands had escaped, clinging to her damp neck. She was young, younger than he had first thought, but her eyes, when she risked a glance toward the noise of the cattle, looked ancient. Eli was not a man given to noticing such things. He had seen hardship. He had seen men and women broken by the frontier. It was the way of things. But then Corbett shouted again, his voice cracking like a whip. "Brant, get that girl moving! We ain't got all day!" Eli watched her. At the sound of Corbett's voice, she flinched. It was not a big movement. It was a tightening of the shoulders, a sudden, sharp intake of breath. a duck of the head, as if expecting a blow that had not yet come. Eli's hand stilled on his cigarette paper. He watched her for the next hour as the cattle were counted. She never stopped moving, hauling water, mending a broken fence wire, clearing muck from a trough. And every time a man's voice was raised nearby, not even at her, just raised in anger or effort, she did the same thing. That small, tight flinch, a wince that was gone as fast as it came. It was a flinch he recognized. He had seen it in a spooked horse, one that had been beaten until it expected the hand to be a fist. He had seen it in himself, years ago, when he was a boy and his father drank too deep from the jug. It was the look of something that had learned that every sound was a threat, every voice a promise of pain. And it shook him. It shook him in a way the heat and the dust and the long, violent trail had not. Corbett finished the count, scribbling on a piece of paper. Short 3 head, Morgan. "They're not short," Eli said, his voice flat. He was still watching the girl, who was now scrubbing a large pot near the cookhouse, her back to him. "They scattered in the canyon 2 nights back. We found 'em. They're in the herd." "My count says short." "Your count is wrong," Eli said, his eyes finally moving to Corbett. His gaze was steady and cold. Corbett held the look for a long moment, then spat. "Fine. I ain't got time to argue over 3 scrawny steers. Come inside. Get your pay." Eli followed him into the dim, stifling ranch house. He took the banknotes, counted them twice, and folded them into his pocket. He wanted to be gone. He wanted to be on his horse, riding toward the sunset, with a bottle of whiskey and a clean bed waiting in town. But he found himself standing at the door, his hand on the frame. He cleared his throat. "That girl," he said, trying to sound casual, like it was an afterthought. "The one working the well." Corbett turned from his desk, his eyes narrowing. "What about her?" "She good stock, she works hard." Corbett let out a short, harsh laugh. "She's broken stock, is what she is, but she works. Costs me nothing but floor scraps." "You looking to sell?" Eli asked, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs, a dull, stupid beat. He did not know why he was saying it. Corbett's face went flat. The humor, what little there was, vanished. He walked slowly toward Eli, stopping so close Eli could smell the stale tobacco on his breath. "Now, you listen to me." "Morgan," Corbett said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're here for cattle. You ain't here for my property. You go to town, you find yourself a painted woman. You spend your money, but you keep your eyes off what's mine." "It was just a question," Eli said, his hand moving, slow and deliberate, to rest on the butt of his own pistol. It was the wrong question. Corbett hissed, "That girl ain't yours to save. She ain't even worth the bullet it would take to put her down if she tried to run. You understand me? She is nothing." Eli looked into the rancher's dead eyes. He saw the coldness there, the absolute certainty of his right to own, to break, to destroy. Eli gave a slow nod. He dropped his hand from his gun. "I understand," he said. "Business is concluded." He turned and walked out of the ranch house, the sun hitting him like a physical blow. He did not look for the girl. He walked straight to his horse, swung into the saddle, and rode out of the yard, the dust rising behind him. He did not look back. He rode for 2 miles, the ranch disappearing behind the heat haze. He rode until the anger in his gut cooled to a hard, sick knot. He had done the right thing. He had walked away. It was not his fight. It was not his business. He had seen 100 like her. He could not save them all. He could not even save himself. Most days. He pulled his horse to a stop in the middle of the vast, empty desert. The silence was absolute, broken only by the horse stamping a fly. He thought of her flinch. He thought of the lullaby his own mother used to sing, a thing he had not remembered in 20 years. He thought of the times he had walked away, the failures that haunted his sleep. He sat there for a long time, the sun beating on his hat. Then, with a low curse that was lost in the wind, He turned his horse around. He did not ride back to the ranch, not yet. He rode to a small, hidden arroyo a mile south of Corbett's land, a place he had scouted for water earlier. He dismounted, built a small, smokeless fire, and waited for the dark. He was torn. To go back was to step into something bigger than him, something that had no good end. It was theft. It was a hanging offense. It meant Corbett, and men like him, would hunt him. To ride on was to be safe, to have his money, to live another day. He thought of her eyes, ancient, empty. He looked at his own hands, calloused and scarred from rope and rock and men. He made a fist. He had walked away from a fight with Corbett, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that he could not walk away from this. He made his quiet decision. He was going back. Night fell hard and fast, the desert sky filling with a million cold stars. The heat did not break. It just settled, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The sounds of the ranch carried on the still air, a faint harmonica, a man's drunken laugh, the stamp of horses in the corral. Eli moved on foot, leaving his horse tied in the arroyo. He moved like a ghost, keeping to the shadows, his boots making no sound on the hard-packed earth. He knew the layout of the place from his arrival. He skirted the bunkhouse, slipped past the main house. He was heading for the barns. He heard it before he saw it, a low grunt, the sharp, wet thwack of leather hitting flesh. He froze in the shadow of the water tower. It was Brant, the overseer. He had Alina pinned against the far wall of the barn. In the deep darkness between the stalls, Eli could just make out their shapes. Brant was drunk, swaying slightly. "You think you're better than me?" Brant slurred, his voice thick. "Looking at them cowboys, you think one of them will take you?" He struck her again, an open-handed slap that echoed in the quiet barn. Alina made no sound. She did not cry out, did not beg. She just took it, her body absorbing the impact. Eli's hand went to his knife. His blood was boiling, a hot, white rage that demanded violence. He wanted to step out, to gut the man where he stood. But he waited. He watched. Brant hit her again, and she fell to her knees in the straw. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "That's where you belong." He leaned down, his hand fumbling at her dress. Alina moved then. It was not a fight. It was a small, desperate act. She whispered something. Brant paused. What'd you say?" "Nothing," she whispered, her voice rough. "I said nothing, sir." "You're lying." He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. Eli took one step forward, his hand tightening on the knife hilt. "Go to sleep," she whispered, her voice trembling, but clear. "Go to sleep. Go to sleep." Brant froze. He seemed confused by the words. He let go of her hair and shoved her backward. She hit the wooden wall with a dull thud. "You're crazy," Brant muttered. "Plumb crazy." He turned and stumbled out of the barn, heading toward the bunkhouse, leaving her crumpled in the shadows. Eli stayed hidden, his breath coming hard and fast. He waited until the bunkhouse door slammed shut. He waited 5 more minutes, every second stretching into an hour. He stepped into the barn. Alina had not moved. She was curled on her side, her face hidden, her body shaking in silent, agonizing tremors. He stood over her, a dark shape in the gloom. He watched her push herself up. Slow, every movement a fresh pain. She sat with her back against the stall, pulling her knees to her chest. She did not cry. She just stared into the darkness. And then, so quiet he almost missed it, she began to whisper. It was a song, a lullaby. The words were broken, half-remembered, but the tune was there, a simple, sad little melody. A mother's song. She was singing it to herself, her voice a thread of sound in the oppressive dark. She was hiding the pain, rocking herself, soothing the hurt that no one else would ever see. Eli stood there for a full minute, his heart feeling like it was being crushed in a vice. This was not a broken mule. This was a person, holding the last fractured pieces of herself together with a song. He backed away, silent as he had come, and melted back into the night. He made it back to the main yard. He knew he could not take her tonight. Not like this. Brant was awake. The ranch was still active. He needed a better plan, but he could not leave her in that barn. He circled the cookhouse. He remembered seeing Brant lock a heavy wooden door on the side of a small, windowless storeroom earlier, a place for flour and salted meat. He gambled. He found the storeroom. The bar was heavy, the padlock thick. He could not break it without noise. He moved on, his mind racing. He checked the smokehouse. Locked. The tack room. Locked. He was circling back to the barn when he saw her. Brant was dragging her by the arm from the barn, his steps still unsteady. He was not hitting her now, just pulling her, his grip like iron. "You'll sleep where I put you," Brant growled. "Sleep with the rats. Maybe you'll learn some manners." He hauled her to the storeroom. Eli flattened himself against the main house wall, just 20 feet away. He watched Brant fumble with a key, open the heavy padlock, and shove Alina inside. She stumbled and fell in the dark. Brant laughed, slid the bar back in place, and clicked the padlock shut. He looked around the yard, his eyes passing right over the shadow where Eli hid. Then he turned and lurched back to the bunkhouse. Eli waited. He counted to 500, his eyes fixed on the bunkhouse door. No one came out. The harmonica music had stopped. The ranch was finally falling into a deep, drunken sleep. He moved to the storeroom door. He put his ear to the wood. He heard nothing, not a sound, not a sob, not a whisper, just silence. He tested the lock. It was solid brass, heavy and strong. He could not break it. He looked at the hinges. They were bolted from the inside. He felt a wave of frustration and rage. He had come back, and he was useless. He pressed his face close to the rough wood of the door. "Miss," he whispered. Silence. "Miss, are you all right in there?" He heard a faint rustle, like dry leaves, a scraping sound. She was there. She was listening. He had nothing to offer, nothing to break the lock with. He had only his anger, and that was no good to her. He backed away. He would have to wait. He returned to his hidden camp in the arroyo, his mind a turmoil. He did not sleep. He stared into the embers of his fire, seeing her face, hearing that song. He saw the cut on her cheek from Brant's ring, the raw scrape on her temple where she had hit the wall. He remembered her feet, bare and bleeding from the day's work. He thought of Corbett's words. Not worth the bullet. He finally dozed as the false dawn began to gray the eastern sky, and his sleep was filled with images of locks and chains and his own father's angry face. He woke with the sun, his decision harder than ever. He spent the day watching the ranch from a high ridge. Using his spyglass, he watched her. She was let out of the storeroom just after sunrise, her face pale and streaked with dirt. She had a new cut on her cheek, a dark, ugly line. Her feet were wrapped in stained, dirty rags, and she limped as she hauled the water buckets. Brant watched her all day, his eyes cold. He did not hit her. He did not have to. She was terrified. Eli waited. He watched the sky. The air was growing strange. The wind was picking up, shifting from the north, carrying a smell of grit and static. A storm was coming. A real New Mexico howler, the kind that could strip paint from a wagon. This was his chance. That night, the blackness was total. The stars were gone, choked by a low, fast-moving ceiling of clouds. The wind was already starting to moan, a low, rising note that set the horses on edge. Eli made his way back to the ranch, but first, he went to his saddlebags. He took out his canteen, full of clean water. He took out the small medical kit he always carried, a linen bandage, a small tin of salve. He slipped a heavy file, the kind used for shoeing horses, into his belt. He found the storeroom. The wind was loud now, shrieking around the corners of the buildings, kicking up sand that stung his face even through his bandana. It was perfect cover. He went to the padlock. He did not bother with the file. It would take too long. He jammed the hardened steel tip of his largest knife into the shackle, set his weight against it, and twisted. The metal groaned, but it held. He cursed, silent. He looked at the heavy bar. It was held by two thick iron brackets, bolted to the door frame. He put his shoulder to the door. It was solid oak. "Alina!" he yelled, his voice barely audible over the howl of the wind. "Stand back from the door! Stand back!" He did not know if she heard him. He did not care. He pulled his pistol. He was not going to shoot the lock. That was a fool's game. He aimed at the top bracket, at the heads of the bolts holding it to the frame. He fired twice. The sound snatched away by the wind. The wood splintered. The bracket twisted, hanging by one bolt. He fired twice more at the bottom bracket. The wood screamed. The bracket ripped free. The bar was loose. He holstered his pistol, grabbed the bar, and tore it from the ruined frame. He pulled the door open. It was black inside. The smell of old grain and rat droppings hit him. Alina? He saw her, a pale shape huddled in the far corner, her eyes wide and luminous in the dark. She was staring at him, not with hope, but with pure, animal terror. She had the cut on her cheek, fresh and bleeding. Her feet, unwrapped, were a mess of raw skin and dried blood. She said nothing. She just stared. She was a thing caged for so long. The open door was just a new kind of threat. "I am not him," Eli said, his voice low and steady, trying to cut through the storm's noise. "I am not Corbett. I am not Brandt." She just stared. "I saw what he did to you," Eli said, "in the barn. And tonight." Her eyes flickered. He set the canteen and the bandage down on the floor, just inside the doorway. He did not move closer. He did not want to spook her. "Here," he said, "water, for your face, your feet." She did not move. He pushed them a little further, with the toe of his boot. "Take them. I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at the supplies, then back at him. He could see the calculation in her eyes. Was this a trick? A new, crueler kind? "I'll come back," he said. "The storm is getting worse. It will cover us. If you want out, I'll take you." He backed out of the doorway, his heart sinking. She did not believe him. Why should she? She had never been given a reason to believe any man. He closed the door, leaving it unbarred. He left her with the water and the bandage. He left her with the choice. He retreated to the shadows of the barn, settling in to wait. He would give her an hour. If she did not come, he did not know what he would do. He could not force her. The storm hit its peak. The wind was a solid wall, a screaming, deafening force. Sand and small pebbles raked the sides of the buildings. It was a night of fury, a night when the world was coming apart. He heard a sound, a faint scrape. He looked toward the storeroom. The door was creeping open. Just a crack. He saw her hand, then her face. She looked out into the howling chaos of the yard. She was holding the bandage in her hand. She had not used it. She looked at him, a shadow in the barn door. He did not move. He just waited. She took one step out, then another. She was limping badly, but she was moving. She crossed the few feet of open ground, the wind tearing at her thin dress, and stopped just in front of him. She still did not speak. She just looked at him, her eyes asking the question she could not voice. "You want out?" Eli asked, his voice rough against the wind. She hesitated. Her whole body was trembling, from cold, from fear, from a lifetime of pain. Then she gave one tiny, sharp nod. "All right," Eli said. It was settled. "We have to move fast. They'll be sleeping deep in this." He turned and ran, half crouched, toward the corral. He had picked his horse earlier. A fast-looking bay mare that was not Corbett's personal mount, but not a broken-down nag either. The horses were panicked by the storm, milling and screaming. He slipped a rope over the mare's neck, got a bridle on her, and led her to the gate. He threw his own saddle on her back, his movements quick and practiced. Alina was right behind him, a silent shadow clinging to the fence. "Can you ride?" he shouted. She shook her head. "You'll ride with me," he said. He mounted the horse, the mare dancing under him, terrified of the wind. He reached down his hand. "Come on." She stared at his hand. It was calloused, scarred, a man's hand, just like all the others. "I promise you," he yelled over the shriek of the wind. "I will not hurt you, but we have to go, now." She took a breath, and she took his hand. He pulled her up, seating her in front of him, her back against his chest. She was light, lighter than a child, all sharp bones and trembling. He wrapped one arm around her waist, holding her tight, and took the reins in his other. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the mare into a run. They burst out of the ranch yard, the gate flying open, and plunged into the teeth of the storm. The world was a screaming vortex of blackness and sand. The mare ran blind, trusting Eli's heels. Alina clung to him, her hands grabbing the horn of the saddle. She was rigid with terror, her face buried against his chest, shielding herself from the stinging sand. They rode hard for what felt like hours, the storm their only ally, erasing their tracks as soon as they were made, covering the sound of their escape. Eli did not slow. He pushed the mare until her lungs were burning, until they were miles away, deep in the trackless waste of the desert. Only when the first gray light of dawn began to fight the storm clouds did he pull the mare to a walk, letting her blow. The wind was dying, settling back into a mournful, steady blow. Alina had not moved. She was half conscious, her body gone limp against him. He could feel the small, rapid beat of her heart against his ribs. He thought she was asleep, or fainted. But then her voice came, a dry, cracked whisper, almost lost in the wind. "They'll hunt you now," she whispered, her face still pressed to his coat. "They'll hunt you now, too." Eli tightened his arm around her. He looked back at the hell they had left, and then ahead, into the vast, empty, and dangerous land before them. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "I reckon they will." Alina woke to a world of grit. The first thing she felt was the sting of sand in her eyes and the raw, throbbing complaint of her feet. Her first thought, a cold spike of panic, was that she was back in the storeroom, that the storm had been a dream, the escape a fantasy. But the air was wrong. It was open. It smelled of wet sage and the cold, clean emptiness of the high desert after a storm. She was on the ground, but something was covering her, a heavy canvas duster, stiff with trail dust and smelling of tobacco, leather, and the man himself. She was tucked into the lee of a high rock, a natural overhang that had kept the worst of the night's fury off them. She pushed the coat away. Sitting up too fast, the world spun. Her body was a collection of new aches, layered on top of the old ones. The ride had bruised her terribly. Her muscles clenched tight for hours against the saddle and the man. Eli Morgan was 10 feet away. He was not sleeping. He was standing, his back to her, watching the new, bruised purple dawn break over the desert. The stolen bay mare stood nearby, head hanging low, exhausted. He had not made a fire. He was just watching, his rifle held easy in the crook of his arm. He looked like he had grown out of the rock, a piece of the hard, unforgiving landscape. He heard her move, but he did not turn. "Water's in the canteen," he said, his voice a low rasp. "Don't drink it all. Just enough to wet your mouth." She saw his saddlebags near her. She crawled to them, her hands shaking. She found the canteen. The water was warm, but it was the best thing she had ever tasted. She did as he said, taking only a small sip, letting it sit on her tongue before she swallowed. She looked at her feet. The rags she had wrapped them in were gone, lost to the storm. They were raw, caked in drying blood and black sand. She looked at him. He was still watching the horizon, watching their back trail. She had to ask. The word came out cracked and torn. "Why?" He was silent for a long moment, the wind whistling softly in the rocks. "Why me?" she whispered, louder this time. She had to know what this new, terrifying debt was. Eli turned his head, just enough to look at her over his shoulder. His face was grim, his eyes tired. "Because you looked like you'd stop believing anyone would," he said. He turned back to the horizon, and that was all the answer she was going to get. It made no sense to her. It was not a reason. It was not about profit or use. It was nothing. And that, in its own way, was more frightening than Brant's fist. They could not stay there. The overhang was visible for miles. Eli pulled her to her feet, his grip impersonal, like he was lifting a sack of grain. She tried to stand, but the pain in her feet was a white-hot scream. She crumpled. "I can't," she breathed, her hands flat on the sandy ground. "You have to," he said. He was not cruel, just stating a fact. "They'll be looking. The storm's over. It's a clear day." He hauled her up again, this time swinging her completely off her feet, and dumped her onto the mare's back. He climbed up behind her, his arm going around her waist just as it had the night before. She was rigid, her back straight, careful not to lean against him. "You lean back," he ordered, his voice rough in her ear, "or you'll fall off when she walks. Don't waste my time." She did, resting her shoulders and head against his chest. It felt like leaning against a hard oak tree. He kicked the horse into a slow, limping walk, heading west, deeper into the canyons. They rode for half the day, the sun turning from a weak dawn to a familiar, brutal hammer. Eli seemed to know where he was going. He was following a line of dry arroyos, keeping them low and out of sight. Finally, he stopped. It was a place that looked like nothing, just a tumble of rocks at the base of a mesa. But he slid off the horse, walked to a screen of dead cholla cactus, and pulled it aside. Behind it was a dark opening, the ruins of an old stagecoach station, its adobe walls melting back into the earth. It was a ghost of a place, the roof mostly gone, the corral a few broken sticks, but it was shelter. "In here," he said. He led the horse inside the crumbling walls, into what was once a stable. He pulled Alina down, her legs buckling. He set her on an old, overturned feeding trough. "Stay here. Don't move," he said. He took his rifle and went back out, climbing the rocks above the station to watch their back trail. She sat in the dim, hot silence for an hour. She just sat, her hands in her lap, her mind empty. This was what she knew, how to wait, how to be still. He returned, sliding down the rocks like a shadow. He seemed satisfied they had not been followed. Not yet. He came to her, untying his bedroll from the saddle. He unrolled it, took out the small tin of salve and the linen bandage he had offered her once before. He knelt in front of her. Alina's breath hitched. She jerked her legs back, pulling her raw feet under the hem of her ruined dress. "No," she whispered. Eli looked up, his eyes flat. "Don't be a fool. They're festering. You'll lose them. Then I'm stuck carrying you, and you'll be no good to me or yourself." He reached out, not for her, but for his canteen. He uncorked it, poured a splash of the precious water onto a strip of cloth. He grabbed her ankle before she could pull away. His grip was like a steel trap. She froze. She waited. Her whole body was clenched for the blow, for the price of this rescue. He just started to clean her feet. His touch was rough, practical. He scrubbed at the caked blood and sand, his jaw tight with concentration. She could feel the sting of the water, the bite of the salve, but there was no other touch. He was just cleaning a wound, like he would for a horse. She watched the top of his head, his hat pushed back, his dark hair damp with sweat. She watched his big scarred hands as they worked, gentle for all their roughness. He did not just tend the new cuts. He saw the old ones, the white, puckered scars of past injuries, the way her toes were crooked, the thick, yellow calluses that had been split open by the rocks. He saw the story of her life, written on her feet, and he said nothing. When he was done, he had wrapped both her feet in clean linen bandages. They looked white and strange, like tiny ghosts. He stood up, re-rolled his bedroll. He broke off a piece of hardtack from his bag and tossed it into her lap. Eat. She stared at the biscuit. It was food. Given. What do you want? She asked, her voice low. Eli stopped, turned back to her. What? The water, the bandage, the food. What is the price? She had to know. The not knowing was worse. Brant always made the price clear. Corbett always made the price clear. Eli looked at her for a long time. He looked confused. And then something else. Something dark. Anger. There ain't no price, he said, his voice quiet. I ain't them. Everyone's them, she whispered, her eyes on the hardtack. No one gives a thing for free. Well, you ain't met me then, he said, and the anger was plain now. He was not angry at her. He was angry at the question. He stalked to the other side of the ruined station, sat with his back against the wall, and pulled his hat down over his eyes. Alina stayed where she was, the hardtack in her hand. She did not eat it. Later, when the sun was low, she tried to talk to him. She had to make him understand. I can work, she said, her voice hoarse. I'm strong. I can haul water. I can mend. I can cook. If I have a fire, I can do what's needed. He did not lift his hat. There ain't no water to haul, and we ain't making a fire. But I have to, she said, desperate. I have to pay for the horse, for the ride. He finally pushed his hat up. His eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, but they were sharp. Pay me. You pay me by doing what I say. You stay quiet. You stay hidden. You get your feet healed so you can walk, so you can ride. You stop talking about paying. She flinched, biting her lip. She had made him angry. That was bad. I don't know how, she whispered, the truth tearing out of her. I don't know how to not. She looked down at her hands. I don't know how to talk free. The words hung in the dusty, quiet air. Eli's anger seemed to drain out of him, leaving just the weariness. He rubbed his face with both hands. Then don't talk, he said, his voice flat. Just be quiet and eat the damn hardtack. Alina. She started, her head snapping up. What? I said eat. You said my name. Eli frowned. It's your name, ain't it? Brant, he never used it. Corbett never used it. They just called me girl. Or you. Eli just looked at her. He put his hat back over his eyes. Well, it's your name. Get used to it. She ate the hardtack, her whole body shaking. She woke before him, the first gray light of dawn. He was asleep, finally, slumped against the wall, his rifle across his lap. His face, in sleep, looked younger and just as sad. She looked at him. This man, this Eli. He had stolen her. He was being hunted, just as she had said. Because of her, he had cleaned her feet. He had given her a name. And he would be caught. He would be hanged. All for her. She was a curse. She was nothing but trouble. She knew what she had to do. She had to save him from her. She stood up, her bandaged feet screaming in protest. She ignored it. She was used to pain. She looked at the canteen, at the saddlebags. She took nothing. She was not a thief. She slipped out of the broken adobe wall, into the cold, sharp morning. She did not look back. She just started walking, heading south, away from him, away from the direction he seemed to be going. She would lead them away, or she would die in the desert. Either way, he would be free of her. She walked for what felt like hours. The sun came up, the heat began. She did not know how long she had been walking when she heard the horse. She froze. Was it them? Was it Corbett? It was Eli. He rode up, not fast, just steady. He stopped the mare 10 feet from her and just sat there, looking down at her. He was not angry. He looked disappointed. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. "Away," she panted. Her feet were bleeding again. The bandages stained dark red. I'll just bring you trouble. They'll hang you." "They might," he agreed. "But if I let you walk off, you'll be dead by noon. And that," he said, his voice hardening, "would make this whole damn thing a waste of my time." I'm not your time," she argued, swaying on her feet. The heat was making her dizzy. "I stole you," he said, his voice flat. "You are my time. You are my problem. Now get on the horse." "No, I won't. I won't get you killed." He let out a sharp, frustrated sigh. He swung down from the saddle, stalked over to her, and before she could protest, he grabbed her, threw her over his shoulder like a roll of carpet, and dumped her back on the mare. He mounted behind her, his arm locking around her waist like a steel band. "You pull a stupid stunt like that again," he whispered in her ear, his voice low and dangerous. "And I will tie you to my saddle. You understand me? You don't get to die, not after I went to all this trouble." She was too weak, too heat-stroked, to fight. She slumped against him, defeated. He rode them back to the station, his jaw set in a hard line. He did not speak to her for the rest of the day. He just redressed her feet, his movements quick and angry. That night, they had to move. The station was not safe. He had seen a dust cloud, far to the east. It could be anything. It could be them. They traveled by night, deeper into the rocky canyons. Heading west, the land was broken, a maze of stone and shadow. They hid by day. Eli built a small, crude shelter from his canvas tarp, just enough to keep the sun off them. He stayed awake, always awake, watching. He ate little, giving her the larger share of their dwindling food, a handful of beans, a strip of jerky. They fought a terrible, constant thirst, their water running low. They spoke in whispers, if they spoke at all. One day, as he was cleaning his gun and she was stitching a tear in her dress with a needle and thread from his kit, he asked, "How old are you?" "Alina?" She looked up, startled. I don't know." "You don't know?" "No, sir." She flinched, remembering he did not like to be called sir. I think my mother died in a winter. I remember maybe 15, 16 winters since then. I'm not sure." He nodded, sighting down the barrel of his rifle. "No one ever told you?" "No, it wasn't a thing to know." He was quiet. Later, he asked, "Where were you born?" "Texas. I think a man the one before Corbett, he said I was born on his land. He branded me, like a calf." She said it flat, like she was talking about the weather. Eli's hand stopped moving. He did not look at her. He just stared at his rifle. "Where?" he asked, his voice tight. "My back," she whispered. It's just a small one. It was a long time ago." He said nothing. He just went back to cleaning his gun, his movements sharp, almost violent. They found a small pool of water in a deep canyon, a place so hidden no one would find them. It was enough to drink their fill, to water the horse. Eli took the canteens to fill them. "Wash," he said, gesturing to the pool. "We don't know when we'll find more." She looked at him, her heart pounding. The pool was open. He seemed to understand. He took the canteens, walked to a spot 50 yards away, and sat down with his back to her. "I'll watch the trail," he said. She stared at his back. He was not going to watch. He was giving her privacy. She touched the ties of her dress, her hands trembling. She slipped it off, her body pale and thin in the dim canyon light. She waded into the pool, The water so cold it made her gasp. She scrubbed her skin, her hair, and then she looked at her reflection. She had not seen her face in years. Not really, just a flash in a window, or a dark shape in a water trough. Now, she saw herself, a stranger, thin. Her eyes were huge, dark, and terrified. She saw the cut on her cheek, now a healing, purple-red line. She saw the hollows under her eyes. She was a person. She was not just girl. She was this face, this Alina. She touched her cheek, her wet hair. She just stared, her heart aching. Eli was teaching her to ride. He had found a second horse, a scrawny Mustang grazing wild, and had roped it. It was half dead, but it was another set of legs. He put his saddle on the mare for her and rode the Mustang bareback. "You have to learn," he said. "If we're split, you have to be able to run." She was terrified. The mare was tall, but she did what he said. He was patient. He showed her how to hold the reins, how to use her legs. His hands were on hers, showing her the pressure. His hand was on her back. "Sit straight. Don't fight her. Move with her." It was a language of touch she did not understand. It was not for work. It was not for the price. It was for helping. She fell. She hit the hard ground. The breath knocked out of her. She lay there, waiting for the kick, for the curse. He just stood over her. "You all right?" I think so." "Then get back on." She got back on, and by the end of the day, she could make the mare walk in a straight line. It was the first thing she had ever controlled in her life. A small, strange kernel of not freedom, but choice. She could pull the rein left, and the horse went left. It was a miracle. Their bodies began to trust each other. She no longer flinched when he handed her food. He no longer used his harsh, commanding voice. They moved around their small, hidden camps with a quiet rhythm. One night, the cold was deeper than usual. They were in the foothills, the air thin, the fire was tiny, just a handful of twigs. He handed her his blanket. "No," she said. You take it. You're watching." "Take it. I have my coat." It's not enough." He sighed. He sat down, his back against his saddle. "Fine, then get over here." She stared at him. "Get over here," he said, holding the blanket open. "We'll share it. It's warmer. Stop arguing." She hesitated, then slowly, like a spooked deer, she moved. She sat down, her back to him, and he draped the blanket over both of them. He was so close. She could feel the heat of him. She was rigid. He was right behind her. "For God's sake, girl, relax," he muttered. "I'm just trying to stay warm. I ain't Brant." She let out a breath she had been holding for 10 years, and she relaxed. She let her shoulders slump. She let her head rest back against his shoulder. He was solid. He was warm. She expected to feel terror. Instead, she just felt tired. She did not know when she started to cry. It was not a sound. It was just tears. They started rolling down her cheeks, hot, then cold in the night air. It was not for the pain. It was not for Brant, or Corbett, or the heat, or her feet. It was because he had said, "Stop arguing," like she had a right to argue. It was because he had turned his back when she washed. It was because he had wrapped her feet and taught her to ride and called her by her name. It was the overwhelming, crushing, terrifying ache of being treated like a person. Eli felt her trembling. He felt the dampness on his shirt. He froze. He was a man good with horses, with guns, with fists. He was not good with this. He did not say, "Don't cry." He did not say, "It's all right." He just sat there, stiff and awkward. Then, slowly, he shifted. He pulled her closer, his arm settling around her shoulders, tucking her head under his chin. He just held her. He held her while she wept for her lost name, for her dead mother, for the years she had spent as a ghost. He held her, staring into the dying embers of the fire. his own past, his own failures, rising up to meet her pain. She cried herself to sleep, her hand clutching his shirt, her body curled against his, wrapped in his blanket. He did not sleep. He just held on, watching the stars, a grim protector, bound to the broken thing he had stolen. They were getting close to the Rio Grande. The land was changing, getting flatter, drier. They were almost out of food. "There's a settlement," he said one morning. "Las Cruces. It's a big town. We have to risk it. We need supplies to cross the river. We need food." "We?" she asked. "I'm going in," he said. You're going to wait. There's an old mission, south of the town, ruined. Wait for me there. Do not talk to anyone. Do not show your face. If I am not back by sunrise tomorrow, you ride. You hear me? You take the mare. You ride west, and you don't stop." He gave her the reins to the mare. He gave her his water. He kept only his pistol and the few dollars he had. She watched him ride the scrawny Mustang toward the town. She was alone. For the first time, she was free to go, and she was terrified. She went to the ruined mission and hid, just as he said. Eli rode into Las Cruces. It was loud, filled with soldiers, drovers, and merchants. He kept his head down, his hat low. He sold the Mustang for $20, enough for what he needed. He went into the general store. He bought flour, bacon, coffee, and a box of cartridges. He kept his voice low, his answers short. He was walking out, his supplies in a sack, when he saw it, nailed to the wall of the U.S. Marshal's office, right in the town square. It was a piece of paper, new, wanted. He stopped. His blood went cold. $100 reward for information leading to the arrest of the man known as Eli Morgan. Morgan is wanted for theft of property from the Corbett Ranch. And then, below it, in smaller letters, said property is one female, of mixed heritage, named Alina, approx. 18, 20 years. Property is to be returned to Jedediah Corbett. Morgan is considered armed and dangerous, dead or alive. He stood there, staring at the words, theft of property. Property is to be returned, dead or alive. Corbett had done it. He had put the law on them. He was not just a runaway. Eli was now a wanted thief, a man to be shot on sight, and she was just a thing to be returned. He looked around. No one was looking at him. No one had recognized him. His hand moved, slow. He ripped the poster from the wall, crushing it in his fist. He shoved it deep into his pocket. He bought a horse, a strong-looking gelding, with the last of his money. He rode out of that town, not running, but fast. He rode hard. He had to get to her. He had to get them across the river, because now the whole world was hunting them. Eli did not show her the poster. He did not need to. The grim set of his jaw, the new hard light in his eyes, was all the story she needed. He rode back to the ruined mission, his new horse already lathered, the sack of supplies bouncing against his hip. "We're leaving," he said, not even dismounting. He tossed her the sack. "Tie that to your saddle. We cross the river. Now." "What happened?" she asked, her hands already fumbling with the leather straps, her fingers quick and practiced from years of mending tack. "What we knew would happen," he said, his eyes scanning the road, the hills. "Corbett's got a long reach, longer than I figured. He's put the law on us." Alina froze. The law. That was a word that meant nothing good. It meant men with badges and judges and hangman's ropes. It meant she was not just missing. She was stolen. "Then we have to go," she whispered, pulling herself onto the mare. They did not ride, they ran. They pushed the horses hard, heading for the gray-green line of trees that marked the Rio Grande. The town Eli had been to. Las Cruces was behind them, but the river was wide, and there were few places to cross it. Eli knew one, a small, ramshackle ferry town called Socorro. a place for drovers and smugglers, a place where people did not ask questions. But as they topped the last rise, Eli pulled his horse to a sharp halt, his hand flying out to stop her mare. "What is it?" she breathed, her heart hammering. "Trouble," he said, his voice a low growl. "They're waiting." The ferry town was small, just a few adobe buildings, a saloon, and the ferry landing itself. And in front of the saloon, waiting, were 3 men. They were not lawmen. They were hard-looking men. Hired guns, the kind that would kill a man for $10 and a bottle of whiskey. One of them was looking right at them. He had a rifle across his lap. "They telegraphed," Eli said, his voice sick. "Corbett telegraphed every crossing. He knew." "What do we do?" Alina asked, her voice trembling. "We don't use the ferry," Eli said. He looked at the river. It was wide here and muddy, but it was just a river. "We ride through. Stay with me. Whatever happens, you keep riding west. You do not stop. You hear me?" "I hear you," she said, her hands gripping the reins so hard her knuckles were white. "Go!" he yelled, and kicked his horse in the ribs. They charged down the slope, not toward the town, but toward the riverbank 1/2 mile south of it. The men in the town shouted. A rifle shot cracked, the bullet whining over their heads. "They're running for their horses!" Eli yelled. "Go, girl, go!" He plunged his horse into the water. The river was cold, the current swift. The mare, Alina's mare, screamed in panic but followed him in. The water surged up, cold and shocking, soaking her dress, her legs. The horses were off their feet, swimming, their breaths coming in loud, terrified snorts. Alina clung to the saddle horn, her feet out of the stirrups. Another shot. This one was closer, kicking up a spray of water just behind her. Eli had his pistol out. He was trying to steer his horse with his knees, shield her with his own body, and look back at the same time. "Keep going! He's almost there!" The mare's hooves struck mud. She lunged, scrambling up the far bank, water streaming from her. Alina was sobbing, choking on the river water. Eli's horse was right behind her. They were on the other side, but the men were in the river now, too, firing as they came. "Ride," Eli bellowed. They fled. They were in Texas now, or some lawless part of the territory that was just as bad. They were heading for the only cover available, the dark, jagged line of the mountains that rose up from the desert floor. It was a running fight. They were trading open desert for rocks. Eli would pull up, fire 2 shots back at their pursuers to make them take cover, then ride like hell to catch up with her. The bullets were singing around them, cracking off the rocks. "Get low!" he yelled. "Stay low on her neck!" She flattened herself against the mare, her cheek pressed to the horse's wet mane. She was just waiting, waiting for the hit, waiting for the world to go black. Then she heard it, a sound that was not a bullet, not a ricochet. It was a low, wet grunt. She looked back. Eli was still upright in the saddle, but his body was clenched. "Eli!" she screamed. "It's nothing!" he shouted, his voice tight with a pain he would not admit. "Just a graze. Keep riding." He fired his pistol twice more, emptying it, then shoved it back in his holster and spurred his horse on, catching up to her. There was a dark, wet patch spreading on his duster, high on his right shoulder. "It's not nothing," she cried. "It will be if we're dead," he snarled. "The rocks! Get to the rocks!" They rode until the horses were stumbling, their lungs burning in the thin, high air. The sounds of pursuit had faded, lost in the maze of canyons and pine trees. Eli led them up a game trail, a path so narrow she had to close her eyes, until they found it. It was a line shack, an old trapper's cabin, built of rough-hewn logs, its roof half collapsed, its door hanging off one leather hinge. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Eli slid from his horse, his face pale and slick with sweat. He stumbled, catching himself on the doorframe. "Get the horses in!" he panted, his gun in his left hand. "Inside, where they can't be seen." It took all their strength to pull the exhausted animals into the dark, single-room cabin. It smelled of rat droppings and old pine. Alina shoved the door back into place, dropping the heavy bar across it. The second the door was sealed, Eli slumped to the dirt floor, his back against the wall. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "All right," he whispered. His eyes closed. "We're safe. For a bit." Alina knelt in front of him. The light in the cabin was dim, coming in through the cracks in the walls. She could see the blood now. His whole right side was soaked in it. "You're not fine," she said, her voice shaking. "It's not a graze." "It's just a shoulder," he said, his teeth clenched. "Let me see." "It's fine," I said. "Take off your shirt, Eli." He opened his eyes. He looked at her. Her face was streaked with mud and river water, her hair plastered to her head. She was not asking. She was telling. Slowly, his left hand clumsy, he unbuckled his gun belt and let it fall. He tried to pull the heavy, wet duster off, but he grunted in pain and stopped. "Help me," he bit out. She moved, her hands sure. This, she knew. She knew pain. She knew wounds. She had tended to animals, to other servants, to herself. She eased the duster off his shoulders, her fingers brushing the warm, sticky blood. His shirt underneath was a ruin, dyed dark red. "You have to cut it," he said, nodding to the knife on his belt. She took it, the blade long and sharp. She slit the shirt from his waist to his neck, peeling the wet cloth back. She gasped. It was not a clean hole. The bullet had hit him from behind. As he was turning, it had torn a long, raw plow through the muscle of his back and shoulder. It was deep. It was bleeding badly. "It's still in there?" she asked, her voice quiet. "No," he panted. "It went through. I felt it hit the saddle horn. It just tore me up." "We have to clean it," she said. She looked around the cabin. Nothing, just dirt. "Stay here." She went to his saddlebags. She found his flask of whiskey. She found the small tin of salve. She found a clean shirt. She came back to him. She tore his clean shirt into long, white strips. This is going to hurt," she said. "Just do it," he said, bracing himself. She uncorked the whiskey. She took a deep breath, and she poured it, all of it, straight into the open wound. Eli roared. It was a strangled, terrible sound, half sob, half curse. His body arched off the floor, his left hand gripping his knees so hard his knuckles went white. But he did not push her away. He did not strike her. She washed it, her hands moving fast, cleaning the dirt and the cloth fibers from the wound. Her touch was not a woman's touch. It was not a man's touch. It was the touch of a healer, practical, firm, and blessedly impersonal. He was shaking, his face ashen, sweat beading on his forehead. She packed the wound with the salve, her fingers gentle now, and then she bound it, wrapping the linen strips tight around his chest and shoulder, creating a thick, white pad. He slumped back against the wall, breathing hard, his eyes closed. "Good," he whispered. "You did good. You need to rest," she said. She tended the horses, rubbing them down with handfuls of dry pine needles, giving them the last of the grain from Eli's sack. Then she sat opposite him, her back against the other wall, her knees drawn to her chest, and she watched him. Night fell. The temperature in the mountains plummeted. The cabin was high, and the wind found every crack in the walls, whistling, cold, and lonely. They did not dare make a fire. The smoke would be a beacon to the men who were still out there, hunting them. Alina began to shiver. Her clothes were still damp from the river. The cold was a physical thing, a creature trying to get into her bones. Eli was shaking, too, not just from the cold, from the blood loss, from the shock. We won't last the night," she said, her teeth chattering. Not like this." He opened his eyes. They were dull with pain, but he was still there. "The blankets," he managed, nodding at their bedrolls.
"She got him. 2 blankets. Not enough."
"Come here," he whispered. She froze.
"Alina,"
he said, his voice stronger, annoyed.
"don't be a fool. We'll freeze. Separately. Together we might not—"
She hesitated. This was different. This was not sharing a blanket with his back to her. This was something else. "Come on," he insisted. She moved. She unrolled the blankets on the floor, next to the wall, as far from the door as possible. She lay down, her back to him. She felt him move, a heavy, pained shuffle. He lay down behind her, his body pressing against her back. He pulled the second blanket and his own heavy duster over both of them.
He was a furnace, even with the fever from the wound. He was a solid, living wall of heat, but he was trembling.
She was so close she could feel his heartbeat, a labored, heavy rhythm against her shoulder blades. She could feel his breath on her neck. She lay there, rigid as a board, every muscle in her body screaming. This was the nightmare. This was the man in the dark. But it was not. He was not fumbling with her dress. He was not whispering ugly things. He was just lying there, breathing, shivering. "You saved me back there," he whispered, his voice rough, his lips close to her ear. She swallowed. "What?" "In the town, with the deputy." She had almost forgotten. The fight, his face, black with a rage she had never seen. You were gone," she whispered back. "You were killing him." "I know," he said. His breath was hot. "I would have. I didn't even see him. I saw his hands on you." He paused, his body tensing. No one ever stopped me before. Not from that. Not from the dark." She turned, slowly, in his arms. She had to see his face. She was looking right at him. They were nose to nose, 2 people wrapped in a single, dark cocoon. His eyes were open, and they were clear. The rage was gone. There was just pain, and something else, something that looked like her.
"Alina,"
he whispered. Her name. It was a prayer. He leaned in, his movement slow, clumsy, pained. He was giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. She did not know why. His lips touched hers. It was not a storybook kiss. It was not gentle. It was raw. It was chapped lips, and the taste of whiskey, and blood, and the salt of the river. It was desperate, and hesitant, and full of a terrible, aching need. It was a kiss that said, "I am alive, and are you alive too?" It lasted only a second. They pulled back, both of them breathing hard, as if they had run a mile. Alina's heart was a bird, beating itself to death against her ribs. Her hand, the one trapped between them, was on his chest, on his bandaged shirt. She felt the tremor in him. She felt the heat of his skin, even through the cloth. She did not know what she was doing. She was not thinking. She was feeling. Her fingers moved, finding the edge of the slit shirt she had cut. She slipped her hand inside. He tensed, his whole body going rigid. He hissed, part in pain from his shoulder, part in surprise. She laid her palm flat, against his bare skin, against his heart. Thump, 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 thump. It was strong. It was real. It was the heartbeat of the man who had pulled her from the storeroom, the man who had called her by her name, the man who had almost lost his soul for her, and who she had pulled back. She closed her eyes, just feeling it. This was life. This was his life. But it was too much. The touch, the skin, the man, the darkness. Her own past came rushing in. Brant's face, Corbett's voice, the smell of the storeroom. She gasped, pulling her hand back as if she had been burned. She turned her head away, burying her face in the dusty blanket. I can't, she choked out. I can't. She waited for the anger, for the hand to grab her hair, for the price to be taken. She felt Eli's body relax. He let out a long, slow breath. It sounded shaky. He did not touch her. He did not pull her back. "It's all right," he whispered, his voice rough. He waited a beat, and then he said the words that changed everything. "It'll be your choice." She kept her face hidden, but her heart slowed. "Always," he whispered, as if to himself. I reckon that's the only thing that matters." He shifted, a pained grunt, and turned his back to her, giving her the full protection of his body, sheltering her from the cold and from himself. She lay there, staring at his bandaged back in the dark, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel like property. She felt safe. She must have slept, because she dreamed. She was in the storeroom. The door was locked, but this time, it was not Brant. It was Corbett. He was holding a set of leg irons, the heavy, rusted kind. He was laughing, telling her he would not have to brand her again, that the chains were all she deserved. She cried out, a small, choked sound, her hands flying up to fight. "Alina." A hand was on her arm. Gentle. "Alina, you're safe. Wake up." Her eyes flew open. Eli. He was leaning over her, his face pale in the moonlight. He had his gun in his other hand. "You were dreaming," he said, his voice low. She was shaking, her body slick with a cold sweat. The chains," she whispered. He had chains." "There's no chains here," Eli said. He did not let go of her arm. His grip was an anchor, holding her to the real world. "It was just a dream. You're in the mountains. You're with me." She stared at him, her breath coming in sobs. She calmed, slowly. He let her go, but stayed sitting. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his, not his chest, just his hand. His fingers were calloused, strong. "Eli?" she whispered, her voice broken. If I wasn't broken, if I wasn't that girl at the ranch, if I was just a girl in a shop, a lady, whole." She had to ask, Would you still have seen me?" He looked at her, his eyes unblinking in the dark. He thought for a long, long time, the wind whistling outside. "I don't know," he said, his voice honest and raw as his wound. "I reckon I don't see whole people very well. I reckon I'm just as broken as you. Maybe that's the only way we could see each other at all." His answer settled over her, more comforting than a lie ever could have been. They stayed in that cabin for 3 days, hiding, healing. Eli's shoulder was stiff, the skin around the wound red and angry, but the fever had broken. He was alive. They talked, in low voices. He told her about California. "We can get there," he said. He was sitting by the door, cleaning his pistol with his left hand. "Soon as I can ride proper, we can cross the mountains, be in Arizona territory by the end of the month. Then California. It's new. I can get work on a ranch, a new ranch. You could, I don't know, just be..." Alina was by the cold hearth, restitching the bandage. "People like me don't get new," she said, her voice flat. "They just get different. A new town, a new name. But I'm still me. I'm still what he made me." "You're not what he made you," Eli said, his voice low. She shook her head. "You don't know." She put the needle down. She had told him about it. She had not shown him. The kiss, his choice, his answer to her dream, it made her want him to know. She stood up. She walked over to him. She turned, giving him her back. "You said we were the same," she whispered. "You're wrong." She pulled the ragged collar of her dress down, off her left shoulder. She pulled her dark, tangled hair aside. In the dim light, he saw it. On the smooth skin of her shoulder blade, a small, ugly, puckered circle, a scar, an M. "His name was Miller," she whispered. "The man in Texas, before Corbett.
He said it was so I'd always know who I belonged to.
Eli stared at the scar. A cold, black, killing rage rose in him, worse than anything he had felt by the river. This was not a wound from a fight. This was a signature. His hand, his good left hand, came up. It was shaking. He did not touch the scar. He could not. Instead, his fingers, calloused and rough, went to her other shoulder, to the clean, unmarked skin. He just rested them there. A simple, gentle weight.
He was wrong,
Eli whispered,
his voice thick with a darkness she had never heard before.
The next night, the last night in the cabin, they built a small fire, just a handful of twigs, enough to break the worst of the cold. They ate the last of the bacon.
The silence was different now.
It was not empty, it was full. He knew her. He had seen her mark. She was cold. She looked at him, sitting against the wall, his duster over his knees. He looked back at her. He did not ask, did not motion. He just waited. It was her choice. She stood up, walked the few feet, and stopped in front of him. He held his duster open. She did not sit beside him. She turned, and she sat on him, in his lap, curling sideways, fitting herself against his good side, his left side. It was not about desire. It was about heat. It was about safety. He wrapped the heavy coat around her, enclosing her in his warmth. She let out a long, slow breath, and for the first time, she did not lean away. She rested her head on his chest, right over his heart. She closed her eyes. Thump, 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 thump. It was the only sound in the world. Eli rested his chin on the top of her head. His good arm held her close, his wounded one resting in his lap. He stared into the dying embers of the fire, the weight of her small, broken body a strange, new, and solid thing. He was not just a man running. He was a man protecting, and he did not know, in all his life, if he had ever felt anything so real. Eli's shoulder healed slow, but it healed clean. The mountain air, or maybe just the quiet, seemed to leach the poison out of it. They left the line shack, pushing deeper into the mountains, moving high and silent, until they found a place. It was a small valley, a bowl of green meadow tucked between three gray granite peaks, a stream, fed by snowmelt, cut right through the middle of it, clear and cold. It was a place to breathe. It was a place no one would look, because it led nowhere. We'll stay here, Eli said, just for a bit, till I'm strong, till we're sure those men are gone. They were not just running anymore. They were living. But their supplies were almost gone. The flour, the bacon, all of it. They had the horses, his and hers, but they needed money. They needed a stake to get to California. One afternoon, Eli was watching the valley floor. "Well, I'll be," he whispered. Alina came to his side. Down below, grazing on the rich grass, was a small band of wild horses, 3 mares and a dark-chested stallion. "There," he said, his eyes bright for the first time in a long time. "There's our passage west." It took him 2 weeks, 2 weeks of patience and pain. His shoulders still ached when he threw a rope, but he did it. Alina watched him. He was a different man with the horses. He was not the angry, broken man she had seen. He was quiet and sure and gentle. He did not break those horses with fear. He did not rope them and tie them and beat them into submission. He just worked with them. He sat in the meadow, letting them get used to his smell. He spoke to them in a low, crooning voice. He was, she realized, speaking their language. He was telling them he was not a threat. She helped. She was not afraid of them. She would bring water. She would brush them down, her hands moving in the same steady, practical way she had tended his wound. The horses, sensing her own quiet, broken nature, accepted her. By the end of the 2 weeks, he had all 3 mares halter-broke and calm. He left the stallion. "He's too much," he said. "He belongs here." He knew a man. He said, a trapper who had a lodge on the far side of the mountain. A man who traded in horses, and who did not ask questions. They rode out of their hidden valley, Eli on his gelding, Alina on her mare, leading the 3 mustangs. The trapper's lodge was not a town. It was just a big, ramshackle log cabin that smelled of wood smoke, curing hides, and whiskey. The trapper, an old man named Silas, had a beard to his chest and eyes that had seen too much. He looked at the horses. He walked around them, felt their legs, looked in their mouths. "Good stock," Silas grunted. "You break 'em?" "I did," Eli said. "They'll fetch a good price down in Santa Fe." "I'm not going to Santa Fe." Eli said, "I'm going west. I'll sell them to you. For supplies. And that." He pointed to a heavy, repeating rifle hanging over the fireplace. And he wanted cash. Silas looked at Eli, at his healing shoulder. He looked at Alina, who stood by the horses, her hand on the mare's neck, her eyes watching everything. He nodded. He gave them the rifle, 2 new blankets, a sack full of flour, beans, and salted bacon, and he gave Eli $30 silver. "It's enough," Eli said, strapping the supplies to his saddle. "It'll get us to a stage line." While he was loading, he put the new rifle in Alina's hands. She started, the weight of it unfamiliar. "You need to know how," he said. "The pistol's too much, but this you can learn." He took her out behind the lodge, away from the horses. He set a tin can on a stump. "Just point it," he said. "Look down the barrel. Squeeze. Don't pull." She was terrified. She held the heavy gun, her shoulder braced. The first time she fired, the crack of the shot was deafening. It was the sound of the ambush, the sound of men shouting, the sound of pain. She dropped the rifle and fell to her knees, her hands clapped over her ears, her body shaking. Eli did not yell. He did not get angry. He just waited. He picked up the rifle. He reloaded it. He put it back in her hands. "I know," he said, his voice quiet, his good hand resting on her shoulder. "It's a bad sound, but you control it. Alina, it don't control you. Squeeze." She did. She missed. Again. She missed again. Again. This time, she hit it. The can flew off the stump, spinning. A small, strange feeling went through her, a feeling of power. She looked at Eli. He nodded, a small, grim smile. "See, you can do it." Her confidence grew. She was not just the girl who hauled water. She was the woman who tended the mustangs. She was the woman who could hit a can at 50 yards. She walked taller. Her eyes, when she looked at him, were not just filled with fear. They were clear. But the old wounds were deep. A horse whinnied too sharp, and she would jump, her whole body tensing for a blow. Eli moved too fast behind her, and she would flinch, ducking her head. And she hated anything touching her neck. She could not abide the color of her dress, could not stand the feel of a rope, even the reins, if they brushed her skin. The brand on her back was a constant, cold reminder. They stayed at the lodge for 3 days, waiting for word of a wagon train heading west. On the second day, a man in a black coat and a stiff white collar rode up, a traveling preacher, his Bible heavy in his saddlebag. Silas fed him, and Alina, as she had been doing, brought the plates to the table. She was helping. It felt good to help, to earn her keep, to be useful. The preacher looked at her. He saw her mended flour sack dress, her dark hair, her quiet, downcast eyes. He smiled, a thin, watery smile that did not reach his eyes. "Well, girl," he said, his voice oily and kind, "be a good soul and fetch me a cup of water, would you? The Lord's work is thirsty work indeed." Alina froze. "Girl, fetch." It was Brant. It was Corbett. It was every man who had ever looked at her and seen a thing, a mule, a pair of hands. She could feel Eli at the other end of the table. He had stopped eating. She could feel the anger coming off him, that dark, killing rage he had felt in the river town. He was starting to move. But Alina did something new. She set the plate down, very gently. She straightened her back, the one that carried the scar. She lifted her chin, and she looked that preacher right in the eye. Her voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was quiet and cold and hard as iron. "I am not your girl," she said, her words clear in the silent room. "And I do not fetch." She paused, and then she nodded toward Eli. "I'm with him." The preacher's jaw dropped. He looked at Silas, who was hiding a grin in his beard. He looked at Eli, who had relaxed, and who was looking at Alina with a slow, proud smile that lit his entire face. Alina turned, picked up her own plate, and went to sit by the fire, her heart hammering. But her head was high. That night, Silas told them they would have to share the loft room. The preacher was taking the only other bunk. "It's small," Silas said, "but it's got a real bed, a straw mattress, at least." Alina and Eli stood in the doorway of the tiny room. It was dark, smelling of dust and dried herbs, and in the corner one single narrow bed. This was not the cabin. This was not about survival, about sharing body heat to keep from freezing. This was different. Eli did not look at her. He just took his hat off and tossed it on a peg. He sat on the floor, his back to the wall, and started to pull his boots off. He was going to sleep on the floor. Alina watched him. He was giving her the bed. He was giving her the choice. She looked at the hard, cold floorboards. She looked at his face, tired in the lamplight. She walked over to the bed. She pulled off her own worn boots. She lay down on the mattress, her dress still on, and she turned her back to the room. She heard him. He blew out the lamp. The room went black. The ropes of the bed creaked as he lay down behind her. He did not touch her. They lay there, two stiff, separate lines in the dark, an inch of cold air between them. She could not sleep. He was not sleeping either. She could hear him breathing. "Alina," he whispered, his voice so low it was just a rumble in the dark. "You all right?" She did not answer with words. She just turned over. She turned to him. He was a dark shape, his face pale, and her body, her own body, which she was just starting to learn, seemed to know what it wanted. She moved that last inch. She curled into him, her head fitting perfectly under his chin, her hand coming to rest, as it had in the cabin, on his chest, right over his heart. She felt him let out a long, slow, shaky breath. His good left hand, the one that was not scarred, came up. It rested on her hair. He stroked it, slow, gentle, over and over. He was not asking for anything. He was just touching her, like she was something rare, like she was something precious. And Alina, tucked against the man who had stolen her, slept. She slept without dreams, deep and safe, for the first time in her life. They stayed at the lodge for a full week. Eli helped Silas mend fences, his shoulders strong enough now for the work. Alina cooked and cleaned and fed the chickens, and she smiled. Eli heard her laugh one day, a real, honest-to-God laugh. A camp dog, a skinny yellow mutt, had run up and stolen a piece of biscuit right out of her hand, and she had laughed. It was a light, clear sound, like water over rocks. Eli stopped his work, his axe halfway through a log. He just listened to it. He had never heard that sound before. He had pulled her from the dark, but this was the first time he had ever seen her in the light. It was the best sound in the world. But the lodge was not their hidden valley. It was a stop on a trail. Other men came through, miners, mostly, and a few hard-cased drovers, moving small herds. They saw Eli, the quiet, dangerous man with the healing wound and the new rifle, and they saw the woman who was always with him, the dark-haired, quiet woman who was starting to hold her head up, the woman who slept in his room. They whispered. Men like that, they always whisper.
Alina was coming back from the well. She still hated hauling water. It was a job that reminded her. She heard them, 2 miners sitting on the porch, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "That's him," one of them said, his voice a low drawl. "The one with that girl." The other one laughed. A wet, ugly sound. "Pretty thing. Wonder what he paid for her. Or if she's just his traveling whore." Whore. The word was not a sound. It was a physical blow. It was Brant's fist. It was Corbett's cold eyes. It was the brand on her back. All the light, all the laughter, all the safety it just shattered. The wooden bucket slipped from her hands, hitting the dirt with a hollow thud. The miners looked over, saw her standing there, her face paper white. They saw her, and they smirked. Alina turned and ran. She fled, back to the loft, back to the only safe place she knew. Eli found her there, huddled in the corner, her knees drawn up to her chest, her head hidden. She was not crying. She was still, that terrible, empty, broken stillness he remembered from the storeroom. "Alina," he said, his voice soft. He knelt, touched her shoulder. She exploded. She scrambled away from him, her eyes wild with a pain he had not seen in weeks. "Don't touch me," she screamed. "Don't!" "What is it? What happened?" he asked, his heart going cold. "They said it," she whispered, her voice broken. They said what I am?" "What? Who said? Tell me." "Those men!" she sobbed, the tears coming now, hot and fierce. They called me you're that word, that awful word." She looked at him, her face a mask of self-hatred. "And they're right. Eli, what else am I? What else can I be?" "You're not," he said, his voice a low growl, his own anger rising. "You're Alina. I'm nothing," she cried, hitting the log wall with her fist. "I'm just what they see. I can't wash it off. I can't write it off. It's in me. It's what I am." He reached for her, tried to comfort her, to pull her close. "That ain't true." "It is," she yelled, shoving him away. You don't understand. You're you. You were born a man. You were born free. You can just be. I was born low. I was born wrong. I was born property." She was hysterical now, the words tearing out of her. You can't just love that. You can't make me clean. I'm not wife. I'm that. I'm just that." Her words hit him harder than the bullet had. "I was born low. You weren't." He looked at his hands. He looked at her, broken and sobbing in the corner. He was shaking. He was shaking with a rage so deep, so black, he could not breathe in that room. It was not at her. It was at them. It was at the miners. It was at Corbett. It was at Miller, the man in Texas. It was at the preacher, with his oily, kind voice. It was at the whole damn ugly world that had taken this woman and branded her, not just on her back, but on her very soul. He could not fix this with words. He stood up. "Stay here," he said, his voice a choked growl. He left. He stalked out of the loft, down the stairs, and onto the porch. The 2 miners were still there. They looked up as he came out. Eli did not say a word. He walked right up to the one who had spoken, and he hit him. His good left fist, a single, perfect, brutal blow that sounded like an axe splitting wood. The man's jaw broke, and he went down, unconscious. The other man scrambled, his hand going for his pistol. Eli was faster. His own gun was in his hand, the barrel jammed up under the man's chin, pushing his head back against the wall. "You say one more word," Eli whispered, his voice shaking with a killing calm. "About her, about anything, and I will scatter your brains all over this porch. You understand me?" The man, his eyes wide with terror, nodded, his whole body trembling. Eli shoved him away and holstered his pistol, but it was not enough. Beating them did not fix her. He stalked past them, into the main lodge. Silas was there. The preacher was there. Eli's eyes were wild. searching. He needed something. He saw it. On a shelf behind Silas's counter, a small wooden box of trinkets, things traded by Indians, things left by dead miners, and in it a ring, a small silver ring, hammered crude, probably from a Spanish dollar. It was set with a cheap piece of blue-black stone, an obsidian chip. It was nothing. It was cheap. It was everything. He had no money. He had given Silas every dollar he had for the rifle and the supplies. He looked at Silas. Silas looked at him. Eli reached over the counter, his hand plunging into the box. He grabbed the ring. "Eli," Silas started, his voice a warning. "That ain't—" Eli just took it. He palmed it, that small, cold circle of metal. He turned and walked out. He had stolen it. He had stolen her. And now he had stolen this. The rain had started, a cold mountain drizzle that turned the yard to mud. He walked back to the loft, his boots heavy, his heart hammering. He opened the door. She was still there. Her crying softened to a low, hopeless moan. She was on the bed, her face buried in the straw mattress. Alina. She looked up, her face a mess of tears and straw, her eyes red and swollen. He walked toward her. He was covered in mud. His hand was shaking. He stopped in front of her. He opened his fist. The cheap, dark ring sat in his palm. What is that?" she whispered, her voice broken. He did not answer. He did not know the words. So he just dropped. He dropped to one knee, in the mud and dust and straw of the loft floor. His bad shoulder ached from the punch. His body was tired, but his eyes were burning. "I don't care," he said, his voice raw, shaking with all the things he could not fix. "I don't care what they call you. I don't care what you were. I don't care what he did. I don't care that I was born whatever I was." He held out the ring. "You," he said, his voice breaking. You're the only thing I ever wanted right, the only thing I ever chose that mattered." Alina just stared. She stared at the ring. She stared at this man, this impossible man, kneeling in the mud. For her. For property. For that word. She broke. It was not a sob. It was a wail, a sound from the deepest, most broken part of her. A sound of a life of pain, of loneliness, of being nothing, shattering open. "Eli, no!" she wept, shaking her head, her hands flying up to cover her face. "No, you don't owe me this. You saved me. You don't owe me this." "I know," he said, his voice soft but fierce. He grabbed her hand, the one that was not covering her face. He pushed the ring onto her finger. It was too big. "I ain't doing it 'cause I owe you," he said, his eyes locked on hers, holding her, demanding she see him. "Then marry me anyway." She looked at him, at his face, the face that had been angry and sad and patient, the face that was now just hers. She did not say yes. She did not have the word. She launched herself off the bed, into his arms. She was on her knees, too, in the mud. She grabbed his face with both her hands, and she kissed him. It was not the kiss from the cabin. It was not hesitant. It was a storm. It was salt, and tears, and desperation, and a final, shattering yes. It was her choice. He held her, his arms wrapped around her like he was drowning and she was the only solid land. He kissed her back, all the anger, all the pain, all the years of running, pouring out of him. He lifted her, carried her the 2 steps to the bed. He laid her down. And that night they lay together, bare skin to bare skin. It was not what she had feared. It was not the price. It was not taking. It was slow. It was tender. It was almost shy. Every movement was a question. Is this all right? And every answering touch, every small breath she let out, was a yes. He whispered her name, over and over, like a prayer. He whispered that she was beautiful. He whispered that she was his. Not his property, his heart. And for the first time, in a world that had only ever taken from her, Alina gave herself to this man, in the dark, in the loft, with the cold rain drumming on the roof. And two broken, stolen people, in their own way, made themselves whole. The peace in the mountain valley was a fragile, borrowed thing. They both knew it. The night in the loft, the warmth of lying skin to skin, had changed them. It was a secret, unspoken promise. But the world, the one that had branded her and hunted him, was still out there, just beyond the trees. The fight with the miners was the turning point. Eli had not killed the man, but he had marked him. Silas, the old trapper, was nervous. "You're good folk," he grunted, packing them a fresh sack of jerky. "But that man, he's got friends. And you got enemies. That preacher, he's gone." But he was asking questions, asking about her, about the brand on her hand from that ring. Alina's hand flew to her left hand, the cheap, stolen ring. She had worn it proudly. Now, it felt like a target. "You gotta move," Silas said. "Get to that wagon train. Get west. Get lost." Eli nodded, his face grim. His shoulder was healed, but it was stiff. He was ready to ride. They left the lodge at dawn, pushing south and west, heading for a ferry crossing on the Pecos River. It was the last big water before the Arizona territory, the last real line of defense before the open, endless desert. They rode hard, but they rode careful, sticking to the arroyos, the high ridges, sleeping cold. No fires. They were not running from the miners. They were running from the past. But the past had faster horses. They did not see the man. He was high above them, on a ridge, glassing the trail with a U.S. Army spyglass. He was a man who made his living from paper, from posters, from other people's misery. He was a bounty rider. He had seen the poster in Las Cruces. He had heard the whispers from a miner in a Santa Fe saloon. Whispers about a cowboy with a healing bullet wound and a dark-haired, half-wild woman. He watched Alina, saw the way she rode, the way she looked at the man beside her. He lowered his spyglass. He did not ride down. He was not stupid. He turned his horse and rode hard for the nearest telegraph station. Eli and Alina felt it, even before they saw it. The air was wrong. They had been riding for 3 days, hard, and they were tired. The ferry town, a miserable collection of 5 adobe buildings and a saloon, was just ahead, sitting on the muddy bank of the Pecos. "It's too quiet," Eli said, pulling his horse to a walk, his hand on his pistol. "I don't like it," Alina whispered. She had the new rifle, the one Silas had given them, resting easy across her saddle. "We go fast," Eli said. "We get on that ferry. We're on the other side in 10 minutes. We just push through." They kicked their horses into a trot, heading for the ferry ramp. And the town came alive. It was not hired guns. It was not soldiers. It was townsfolk, men in suspenders and farm boots, men with sun-scorched faces and shotguns. 10, maybe 15 of them. They poured out of the saloon, out of the livery stable, blocking the path. A big man with a tin star pinned to his vest stepped forward. A local constable, probably. He was holding a piece of paper, a telegraph. "That's them," he yelled, pointing. "That's the man, Eli Morgan. He's the one, the thief." A man next to him shouted, $100, dead or alive, that's what it says. "Eli," Alina breathed, pulling her horse back. "Don't shoot," Eli said, his voice low and urgent. "They're not gunfighters. They're just greedy." He raised his left hand, his good hand. "Hold on, there's a mistake. That poster, it's a lie." "It ain't a lie. Thief!" the constable shouted. "You stole property from Jedediah Corbett. We got the wire right here. We're holding you for the marshal." "He's armed," another man yelled. Eli knew. He knew this was not a talk. He yanked his pistol. "Alina, ride! Ride through them!" He fired.
Not at the men, but over their heads, trying to scatter them. But they were a mob. They were hungry. They fired back. A shotgun blast erupted. The pellets ripped through the air. Eli's horse screamed, hit in the chest, and went down. Eli jumped, trying to get clear, but he was too slow. The horse rolled, his leg trapped, his bad shoulder hitting the hard-packed earth. He cried out in pain. "Eli!" Alina screamed. She turned her mare, raising her rifle. But they were on him. The mob surged forward. She saw a man raise his rifle butt, saw it come down on Eli's head. She saw him go limp. "No!" she screamed, and tried to fire. A man grabbed her mare's bridle. "Got the other one!" She fought. She swung the rifle like a club, knocking the man's hat off. But another man grabbed her from behind, pulling her from the saddle. She fell, hitting the ground hard. She was surrounded. They dragged her to her feet. They were townsmen, farmers, but their faces were ugly, twisted with a kind of righteous anger. This is it," one man sneered, grabbing her hair, yanking her head back. "This is the property." "Worth $100. Another one laughed. "She ain't worth 100 cents, the first man said, his face close to hers. "Stupid whore. Look at the trouble you caused. Got that man killed, maybe." She spat in his face. He hit her, an open-handed slap that sent her reeling, her ears ringing. "You'll learn respect," he snarled. "Tie her up," the constable yelled, wiping his sweaty face. "Tie her to the post. We'll hold her till the marshal gets here. And someone check that cowboy. If he ain't dead, tie him up too." Two men dragged Eli's unmoving body to the side of the street and left him, bleeding, in the dust. The others they dragged Alina. They hauled her to the thick, sun-bleached hitching post in front of the saloon. She was back. She was back in the dream. She was back in the storeroom. She was back at the beginning. "No," she pleaded, her voice a broken whisper. "No, please." "Shut your mouth. Property." The man she had spat on growled. He tied her hands. He looped the rope around the thick wood, pulling her arms up, tight, until her shoulders screamed. The crowd gathered. Women, even a few children, came out of the houses to look, to whisper. "That's what he stole? Don't look like much. Trouble. Just trouble." The constable looked at the rope. "That won't hold her. She's a wild one. Get something else." The man who had hit her grinned. He went to his wagon, and he came back with a length of dirty rope, thick and stiff, a cattle lead. He walked up to her, his eyes cold and dead. He looped it, not around her waist. He looped it around her neck. He tied it to the post, a makeshift collar. Alina stopped fighting. She just stopped. The world went gray. This was it. This was the end. She was what she had always been. She was a thing on a rope. She looked at Eli. He was a heap of bloody clothes in the dirt. He was dead. They had killed him. All for her, because she was nothing. The man with the grin came back. He had been drinking. His breath was sour. He stood in front of her, so close she could feel his body heat. He looked at the crowd, playing to them. "So," he said, his voice loud, "this is what $100 whore looks like." He reached out his hand, his thick, dirty fingers, and he went to touch her face, to claim her. And in that moment, the gray world shattered. It was not Eli's face he was touching. It was hers. It was not a whore he was touching. It was Alina, the woman who had laughed, the woman who had slept in Eli's arms, the woman who wore his ring. The man's fingers brushed her cheek. Alina lunged. She buried her teeth in his hand. It was not a nip. It was a bite, a feral, tearing bite. Bone deep. She tasted his blood, hot and metallic. He screamed, a high, thin sound, yanking his hand back. He staggered, clutching the bloody mess, his face white with shock. The crowd gasped. And in that 1 second of stunned silence, Alina moved. She was not thinking. She was pure. She was a protector. She looked at Eli. He was not a heap of clothes. He was her heart, and they were going to pay. She twisted, her body scraping against the rough wood of the post. Her hands were tied, but her eyes were searching. Eli, he was unconscious. His gun was gone, but his boot, his left boot. He always kept a knife, a small, flat, skinning knife. She could not reach. The man she had bitten was coming back. His face was purple with rage. You animal!" he roared. He raised his good hand to hit her, to beat her unconscious. She did not flinch. She did not duck. She lunged at him, pulling against the ropes, her teeth bared for another bite. He stumbled back, surprised by her fury. He was afraid of her. She used his fear. She pulled again, hard, against the post, scraping her back raw. Her tied hands fumbled, stretching, straining, toward Eli's boot. Her fingers, they brushed the leather. The man was coming again. She screamed, a wordless, animal roar of pure defiance, and she twisted, her fingers closing on the wooden handle of the knife. She had it. Her hands, still tied, brought the blade up. The man stopped, his eyes wide. She did not go for him. She went for the ropes. She put her back to the post, the knife gripped tight, and she sawed. The sharp blade bit into the hemp. It was thick, but her rage was thicker. The rope on her wrists parted. She was free. Before the crowd could move, she ripped the collar from her neck, the rope burning her skin, and she dove. She did not dive for her horse. She dove for the ground, next to Eli. One of the men, in the initial fight, had dropped his rifle, a heavy Winchester. She grabbed it, she cocked it, the sound a loud, final click in the dead, silent street. She scrambled to her feet, and she stood over Eli's body, the rifle at her shoulder. She was not the girl from the storeroom. She was not the woman in the loft. She was a fury. Her hair was wild, her dress torn, her neck and wrists bleeding. But her eyes were fire. The rifle muzzle moved. Slow, steady. From the constable, to the man she had bitten, to the crowd. "Get back," she said, her voice a low, shaking rasp. "Get back!" The man she had bitten, his hand wrapped in a rag, took a step. "Now, you listen here, girl. You put that—" "I am not your girl!" she screamed, the sound echoing off the adobe walls. The rifle was steady on his chest. "You come one more step and I will kill you. I swear to God I will kill you." The crowd stopped. They looked at this thing, this woman, who had been tied like an animal, now holding all of them at bay. The constable, his hands shaking. "Put them up. Easy, miss, easy. We just wanted the reward." "He is more man," Alina panted, her voice breaking, the tears coming now. Tears of rage, not fear. "He is more man than all of you will ever be." She looked at them. "These cowards. You tie up women," she sobbed. "You beat a man when he's down. He chose me, and you're nothing, just nothing." The words hit them. They were a mob. And she was right. They looked at each other, their greed, their righteousness, all shriveling under the heat of her truth. No one moved. From the back of the crowd, a man stepped out. He was older, his face lined, his hands the hands of a farmer. He wore simple, clean clothes. His wife was right behind him. He held his hands up, palms out. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet, calm. "He's right. No one's gonna hurt him more. But he's hurt bad. That man of yours. He'll die right here in the street." Alina's rifle did not waver. You're with them." "No, ma'am," the woman said, stepping forward. Her voice was like cool water. "We ain't. We saw what they did. The farmer, a Mr. Stroud, nodded. Our place, it's just a mile. It's quiet. We got a hayloft. No one will know. But he needs help. Child. You can't save him with just a gun.
Alina looked down. Eli's face was white. He was breathing, a shallow, ragged breath. He was alive.
She was trapped. She could not fight the whole town. She could not save him here. She looked at the farmer. She looked at his wife. She saw something she had not seen in the crowd. She saw kindness. She gave a single sharp nod. The farmer brought his wagon. The crowd, silent, ashamed, parted. They let them go. The man she had bitten, the constable, they said nothing. They had seen something in her eyes that had scared them worse than Eli's gun. They loaded Eli into the back of the wagon, on a pile of feed sacks. Alina climbed in with him, the rifle never leaving her lap. She held Eli's hand. The farmer, Mr. Stroud, drove them out of that cursed town to his small, neat farm. He and his wife, they hid them. They hid them in the hayloft, high above the horses, in the warm, sweet-smelling dark. You'll be safe here, Mrs., Stroud said, her hand on Alina's shoulder. She had brought a basin of water, clean bandages, and a jar of broth. We ain't much for property. Alina nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The farmer left. His wife left. Alina was alone, in the loft, with Eli. She cleaned him. His head was split open, a long, ugly gash over his temple. His ribs, she could feel the broken, sharp edges under his skin when she undressed him. He was beaten, bruised from head to toe. She cleaned the blood from his face. She bandaged his head. She just sat. She sat, and she held his hand. She held that big, scarred, calloused hand that had stolen her, and healed her, and knelt for her. She did not sleep. She did not eat. For 3 days, she did not move. Mrs. Stroud would come up, leave the broth, and go. Alina, she just held his hand. She held it, as if she could keep him tethered to the world, as if her grip alone could keep his soul from slipping away in the dark. She watched his chest rise and fall. She prayed, not to the preacher's God, but to Eli. Stay, don't leave me. You can't leave me. I'm not done. We're not done. On the 3rd day, the sun was just beginning to warm the loft. His fingers moved. They twitched, just once. Alina's breath caught. She squeezed. Eli, she whispered. His fingers, they gripped, weakly, but they gripped hers. His eyelids flickered. He groaned, a low, pained sound. His eyes, they opened. They were unfocused, confused. He looked at the roof of the barn, at the light streaming through the cracks. Alina? He whispered. His voice was a ghost. She broke. She fell on him, her head on his chest, and she wept. A flood of relief, of 3 days of terror, pouring out of her. I'm here, she sobbed. I'm right here. I thought, oh God, Eli, I thought. He winced, his ribs aching, but his good left hand, his slow, weak hand, came up. He found her hair. He stroked it. He remembered. The horses, the shout, the pain, the dark. He looked at her. He saw the red raw rope burn on her neck. He saw the cut on her cheek, where the man had hit her. He saw her, here, alive. He gave a small, pained, cracked smile. You saved me, he whispered. He lifted her hand, the one he was still holding. He brought it to his lips, and he kissed her knuckles, his breath warm. That means, he said, his voice just a rasp, that means you're mine now. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. They stayed for another week. The Strouds were saints. They fed them. They kept watch. Mr. Stroud, it turned out, had ripped the new poster from the wall. This is what set them off, he said, handing it to Eli. When Eli was strong enough to stand, when he could walk with a cane the farmer had cut for him, he took Alina behind the barn. The sun was setting. He had the poster in one hand.
In the other, he had the dirty, thick rope, the collar that had been on her neck. He had taken it from the street. He built a small fire, just a handful of twigs. He held up the rope. He looked at the raw mark on her neck, now healing. He said nothing. He just threw it into the flames. They watched it, smoking, stinking, twisting in on itself, until it was just a pile of black, brittle ash. Then he held out the bounty poster. He read the words, his voice cold, theft of property. He handed it to her. Your turn. Alina took the paper. She looked at it, at her name, twisted into a lie, at the word property. She thought of the storeroom. She thought of the hitching post. She thought of her hand in his, and she threw the paper into the fire. They watched the edges curl, the words wanted and property and slave turning black, blistering and vanishing into smoke, gone. She stood there, watching the last ember die. The brand on her back still ached, a ghost of a pain. The mark on her neck still stung, but they were just scars. They were not her. She had been tied to that post, and she had fought. She had won. She was free, not because a law said so, not because a man said so. She was free in her heart. She had broken the last chain herself. She turned to Eli. He was weak, leaning on his stick, but he was standing. He was watching her. That night, they stood outside the barn, under the vast, clean, open sky. The stars were a million sharp points of light. It was quiet. She walked to him. She stood in front of him, and she did, so gently, what she had done in the loft. She laid her head on his chest. She put her hand flat over his heart. Thump, 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 thump. It was strong. It was steady. It was his. He held her. He wrapped his arms around her, his chin resting on the top of her head, his lips brushing her hair, her ear. He just held her. Not with passion, not with desperation, but with a new, quiet, solid peace. They were not just running. They were not just stolen. They were found. They made it. It took them 4 more months. 4 months of riding hard, of sleeping cold, of Eli's ribs healing with a dull, constant ache. They sold Alina's mare for passage on a wagon train, 2 souls buried among 50 others, heading for the promised land. They were just another couple, quiet, poor, and desperate for something new. They got off the train in California, at the last stop before the high mountains, and they walked, Eli's gelding carrying their few possessions, until they found it. It was not a paradise. It was a lonely patch of land high in the Sierra foothills. It was covered in gray-green sage and thick stands of pine. It had a creek that ran fast and cold, and a small, flat meadow that was mostly rocks. But it was high up. It was hidden, and it was theirs. They filed a claim on it, with the last of their money. They built a cabin. It was not a ranch. It was a start. The cabin was 1 room, built of pine logs they cut themselves, the gaps chinked with mud and straw. Eli's shoulder was stiff, but he worked from sunup to sundown. Alina worked beside him. She mixed the mud. She hauled the rocks. Her hands, which had once been raw from forced labor, were now raw from their labor. And it felt good. The months turned. The high country summer, hot and bright, faded into a sharp, cold autumn. They bought 2 skinny cows, a handful of chickens, and a sway-backed mule. It was not a ranch, Eli would say, his mouth set in a grim line, but it was home. Alina changed. The woman who had been a ghost, a shadow, began to take up space in the world. The terror in her eyes, the constant, hunted look, it faded. It was replaced by a stillness, a quiet confidence. She ran the accounts. She kept a small, cloth-bound ledger, marking down every cent they spent, every egg she sold to the tiny mining camp 10 miles down the... She fed the animals, her voice a low, soft croon to the chickens, a gentle word for the mule. The act was the same as it had been at Corbett's ranch, but the meaning was everything. These were theirs. And she learned to read.
At night, by the light of a single tallow candle, Eli would sit with her at their small, rough-hewn table. He would take out the one book they owned, an old, battered copy of Shakespeare that had been his mother's. This is an A, he would say, his big, calloused finger tracing the letter. She would repeat, her voice soft, her eyes fixed on the page. He was a patient teacher. She had learned, a patient man. He was still quiet, still Eli, but the darkness that had haunted him, the rage that had boiled so close to the surface, it had settled. He was at peace. One night, she was sounding out the words, her finger moving slowly under the line. To be or not to be? She looked up at him, her brow furrowed. What does it mean, Eli? He looked at her serious face in the candlelight, and he smiled, a real slow smile that reached his eyes. It means, he said, that you're reading Alina. She slept soundly. The nightmares of chains and storerooms, they still came, but they were less, and when they did, she would wake up, her heart pounding, and he would be there, his solid, warm body next to her in their small bed. He would just find her hand in the dark. He would squeeze it, and she would go back to sleep. She laughed more. It was a sound that still surprised him, like a high, clear bird call in the deep woods. She would laugh at the mule when it stole her hat. She would laugh when Eli, trying to fix the leaky roof, got a face full of mud. It was a good life. It was a hard life, but it was theirs. One day, in the early spring, the mail rider came up the trail. He was a rare sight, usually just passing by on his way to the mining camp. But this time, he stopped. "Got a letter," he said, digging in his sack. "For an Eli Morgan." Eli tensed, his hand, almost without thinking, went to the pistol he still wore on his hip. Alina, who was feeding the chickens, went still. A letter meant the world had found them. Eli took it. It was not from Corbett. The return mark was from a territorial courthouse, back in New Mexico. His hands, his steady hands, were shaking just a little. He opened it. He read it, his eyes moving fast over the legal, spidery script. He read it once, he read it twice. "Alina," he said, his voice thick. She came over, wiping her hands on her apron. She saw his face. He looked undone. "What is it?" she whispered. Is it him?" "No," Eli said. He held out the papers. It's for you." She frowned. I can't read this. Not this fast. Not this small." "I'll read it," he said. He cleared his throat. He read, his voice steady, though she could feel the emotion shaking in him. It was an affidavit. It was a legal document. It was from a preacher, a Reverend John Hale. The preacher. It turned out that the Strouds had brought to their farm the man who had seen Eli's beaten body, the man who had seen the raw, red rope burn on her neck. Mr. Stroud had convinced him. The preacher had written it all down. "I have witnessed, with my own eyes, the marks of brutal confinement upon the woman known as Alina. She was held not as a servant, but as chattel, against her will, her rescuer. Eli Morgan acted not as a thief, but as a moral agent." Eli had done it. He had secretly written to Mr. Stroud months ago. He had sent him what little money he had. He had asked him to try, to get a record, to make her free. And Stroud had done it. The paper was stamped. It was official. It was a proof of manumission, a legal, binding document that said she was not, and had never been, legal property. Eli finished reading. The paper trembled in his hand. He looked at her. "Alina," he whispered. It's paper. It's real. You're free. Legally." Alina looked at the paper. She looked at her name. Alina. Written. Official. She had been free in her heart since she burned that poster. But this was different. This meant no one could ever hunt her again. No constable, no bounty rider, no Corbett.
She reached out and touched the paper, as if it were hot. She traced her own name, the name he had given back to her. She did not sob, she did not wail, she just cried, silent, hot tears that dried on her cheeks in the cold spring air. She cried for the girl in the storeroom. She cried for the woman on the hitching post. She cried because the last, heaviest chain, the invisible, legal one, it had just turned to dust. Eli held her. He just held her, in the middle of their rocky, hard-won yard, and let her cry. A few weeks later, a wagon rattled up the trail. It was a traveling photographer, a small man with a big black box and a tripod. He was heading to the mining camp, he said, to take pictures of the men who struck it rich. "But I'll take yours," he said, eyeing their cabin. "For $1, a real tintype, a memory you can hold." Alina shook her head. "No, sir, we don't need—" "Yes," Eli said. He dug in his pocket and produced the silver dollar. "We do." "Eli, no," she whispered, pulling at his sleeve. It's a waste. It's vain." "It ain't vain," he said, his voice soft but firm. He looked at her, his eyes full of that quiet pride she loved so much. I want to see you. I want a record." He convinced her. She stood, stiff and terrified, in front of their cabin. She had put on her one good dress, a simple blue calico Eli had bought her. She had combed her dark hair, pulling it back. She did not know what to do with her hands. The photographer ducked under his black cloth. "All right, folks, hold still. Hold very still. No smiling." Alina was trembling. This was forever. This would show everything, the scars, the lowborn. She felt Eli's hand, his big, warm, calloused hand. He just found hers. He laced his fingers through hers. She gripped him. She held on. The photographer took the picture. Later, as the man was packing, he handed them the small, gray, metal plate. It was them. They were stiff. They were unsmiling. They looked serious. They looked poor. But they were together. A man and a woman, standing in front of their home. His jaw was set, his eyes looking right at the camera, defiant. And she was standing tall, and they were holding hands. They had to go to town, eventually. The town, Pine Creek, was a cluster of buildings in the valley. They needed flour, and seed, and salt. Alina dreaded it. She was free on paper. She was safe in her heart. But the whispers. They walked into the general store. The men at the stove, the storekeep, the women, they all stopped. They looked. They saw Eli, the quiet, tall man who kept to himself. And they saw her, the woman who lived with him, unmarried. Alina just looked at the floor. She could feel the stares. She could hear the whispers. "That's her. Lives with him, up on the ridge. No ring, no shame." Alina flinched, her hand instinctively going to her dress, pulling it closer. The storekeep, a man named Harris, looked at Eli, then at her. "Afternoon. Morgan. What does she need?" He did not look at her. He said she, like she was not there. Alina felt the old coldness, the old, familiar feeling of being invisible, of being property. Eli did not flinch. He did not get angry. He did not reach for his gun. He just moved. He put his arm, his good, strong arm, around Alina's shoulders. He pulled her from her spot at the door, to his side. He pulled her close, so she was tucked against him. He looked at Harris, his eyes clear and cold. "My wife," he said, his voice not loud, but it filled the silent store. "My wife needs a new pair of boots, the sturdy ones." Alina's head snapped up. She stared at him. "Wife?" He had called her wife, in front of them all. The storekeep's face went red. The men at the stove suddenly found their boots very interesting. "Right," Harris muttered, turning to the shelves. "Boots. For your wife." Eli never let her go. He kept his arm around her, a solid, warm, and proud weight, while she picked out her boots. He had not knelt. He had not given her a ring, but he had just married her, in front of the whole whispering world. That night, she was sleeping. The cabin was warm. She woke, slowly. The bed next to her was empty. A flicker of the old panic. Eli? But she was not afraid. She was curious. She slid from the bed, her feet bare on the cold wood floor. She pulled on her robe. She heard a sound, a scraping, a rhythmic, soft shh. It was coming from the barn. She walked, quiet, across the moonlit yard. The barn was just a small, tight shed, but it was theirs. The door was open a crack. She looked inside. By the light of a single lantern, he was there. He was sitting on a low stool, his back to her. He was building something. He had a piece of soft pine, and he was working it, smoothing the edge with a draw knife. Shh. He was humming. That same broken, tuneless lullaby she had sung in Corbett's barn. The one he had heard, he was humming her song. She looked at what he was building. It was small. It had high, carved sides. It had rockers. It was a cradle. Alina's hand flew to her mouth, a soft gasp. He stopped. He turned, his face soft in the lantern light. He was not ashamed. He was not embarrassed. He just looked at her. "Eli," she whispered, walking in. The barn smelled of pine shavings and warm animals. What are you doing?" "I found this wood," he said, his voice rough. It's soft, good for carving." She came and stood over him, looking at the cradle. It was beautiful. He had carved a small, simple star on the headboard. "But Eli," she said, her voice trembling. We don't know. If after all that we don't know if I can." It was the shadow on their hearts, the fear that her past, the beatings, the starvation had broken her in that one, final way. Eli looked up at her. He put his draw knife down. He reached out and took her hand, the one with the cheap, stolen ring. "I know," he said, his voice so gentle it broke her heart. "But a man's got a dream. Alina, a man's got to build for the future, even if it's just a dream." She looked at the cradle. She looked at his hands, the hands that had fought and killed and healed and now built. This was the man who had knelt for her. She had to ask the one last, final question, the one last, final piece of the brand on her soul. "Eli," she whispered, her hand tightening on his. That day, in the loft, you knelt. I did. If I was never that, if I was never a slave, if I was just a girl born wrong, like the preacher's daughter, or a shop girl, whole, not broken, would you still have knelt for me?" She had to know. Was she just the most broken thing he could find? Was it just pity? Eli stood up. He did not let go of her hand. He stood in front of her, this woman he had pulled from the dark, this woman who was his wife. He used his other hand to hold her face. He cupped her jaw, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. He looked into her eyes, and she saw everything, all the miles, all the pain, and all the love. "Alina," he said, his voice a low, rough, absolute truth. "I'd kneel for you, even if you were queen of the whole damn land." She let out a breath she had been holding her whole life. It was not pity. It was not because she was broken. It was because she was her. He smiled, a small, tired, perfect smile. "But I reckon you're better than a queen. You're my wife." He pulled her close. He did not kiss her. He just held her. He led her out of the barn, out of the smell of pine shavings and new dreams. He led her into the middle of their yard. The moon was a bright, silver dollar. The stars were a blaze of glory. There was no music, just the sound of the wind in the high pines. He took her hand. He put his other hand on her waist. And they danced, Slowly, under the stars, barefoot in the cold, soft dust of their own land. She put her head on his chest, her cheek pressed flat, right over his heart. Thump, 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 thump. It was the only sound that mattered. Their love. Not a bright, easy thing, but a thing that had been forged in fire and pain and silence. A love that was hard-earned. A love that was blazing. A love that was, finally, blessedly, real. Thank you for listening to our story around the campfire. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment and tell us where you're listening from, so we can all connect. And if you enjoyed this tale, be sure to subscribe to the Wild West Campfire channel.